Growing up, my mother, Evelyn, absolutely detested me. I was an only child, and it was made very clear that I was, as she put it, the worst mistake she had ever made. I know the circumstances of my birth by heart, as she practically branded the words into my brain. My mother was 19, beautiful and free, brilliant, she told me, and a beauty pageant starlet. She had just won Miss Bricktown and was on her way to becoming Miss Oklahoma. That was, of course, until she fell ill. By falling ill, she meant she was pregnant with me. She told me I ruined her. I stole her from the spotlight. I sucked the life out of her with everything it took to birth and raise me. What she won't tell you is that she didn't just fall ill. She fell right into a male judge who promised her a shining crown. If you ask her, though, she'll never admit it. Hell, in her eyes, I might as well have been some twisted, immaculate conception. From this, you can guess just how horrible my childhood was. She spit venom every time she spoke to me, and though she never hit me, she knew how to instill a deeper, more personal pain. I did whatever I could to try and impress her. Clubs, sports, I was even student body president, but nothing worked. She detested me and viewed me only as a thing that ruined her life. The final straw was when I turned 16. At this age, I had finally well matured and began to take after my mother's looks. She must have noticed, because one day after school I came home to a large, frilly pink dress sitting on my bed. She had signed me up for some beauty pageant 2 towns over. This is when I finally had enough. I was not going to let her ignore and berate me my whole life and then suddenly try and live vicariously through me. Absolutely not. I emancipated, cut off all contact, and began living with a friend of mine. I graduated, went to college, got married. I have a lovely life that never existed under her roof. Now, I am 26 and just have my first child, a baby girl I named Lydia. Last night, the message came in from a number I didn't recognize. Adriana, it's Evelyn. You should be receiving my package any day now. I stared at my phone, dumbfounded. I had changed my number several times in the last 10 years and had no living relatives anymore to give her my new one. I collected myself and replied, "Who is this actually? Is this some kind of sick joke?" The next text came in quickly. "I see you've never lost your attitude, did you? I will be visiting soon to meet my sweet granddaughter. XOXO, Mimi." I knew it wasn't true. She didn't even know what state I lived in, let alone my address. I didn't know who was pulling such a sick prank on me, but I blocked the number promptly. In the next couple days, I quickly forgot about the exchange. The number was blocked and that was it. That was until I opened my door one evening and found a small lavender box on my front porch. On top of the box was a glittery bow with a note tied to it reading, "To Lydia, love Mimi." No shipping label, no return address, just those 4 horrifying words. With shaking hands, I brought the box inside and untied the ribbons, keeping it together. Inside was a bright pink, frilly dress, the same one my mother bought for me when I was 16. Only this one was small enough to fit a very young child in. My hand shut over my mouth in horror. Whoever was pulling this twisted little stunt had taken it too far. This was sick. I grabbed my phone and dialed my husband as quickly as I could. The call failed immediately. He had gone on some stupid bachelor party ski trip and, just my luck, had no service. No, my husband wasn't enough. I went to dial 911 before the next text came in from another unrecognized number. "A lovely dress for the future starlet. It's important to start training them early. I'll be there shortly to help out. XOXO, Mimi." "Listen here, you sick freak," I typed vigorously. "I don't know who you are or what game you're playing, but you better leave my family alone before I get the cops involved." I blocked the number again. I felt exhausted and sick. I hoped that the threat of police would be enough for this to stop. I grabbed Lydia from her playpen and held her in my arms tight before hauling the 2 of us into my bed and going to sleep. I decided that my little girl was not leaving my sight until this whole thing blew over. I'll admit, even if I did think it was a joke, I was getting uneasy. That unease grew into genuine fear the following morning. I awoke to my daughter crying, burrowed in my chest. I pried open my sleep-crusted eyes and immediately did a double take. Perched on top of my baby's head was a small, silver tiara. I could feel acid rising in my throat at the sight. I knew it wasn't ours, as I refused to get my daughter anything even slightly related to pageantry due to the trauma of my youth. I jumped out of bed and practically sprinted to my front door. It was wide open. Someone had been in my home. The only people who knew the keypad lock code were my husband and I. How had someone been in my home? I called the police. They showed up and inspected my home. All that they could tell me was that if nothing was stolen, then I should get security cameras and install new locks. Pissed was an understatement, but I did as they instructed. The new lock would be here the day after tomorrow, and the cameras would be here next week. This was too long for comfort. Things were clearly escalating, and I didn't know if I even had until the day after tomorrow. What that even meant, I hardly knew. I was in a panicked frenzy. I had barely hit submit order when the next message came in, again, from a new unknown number. You are being very rude, Adi. I will see my grandbaby whether you like it or not, and I will be damned if I let some silly lock keep me out. This is my right. You may have ruined me, but I will not let you ruin that little girl too. This time I fully threw up. Adi. It was a name only my mother called me as a child. I had never used it with anyone else. No one else could have known this sick little pet name. This no longer felt like a trick. The truth boiled up like last night's dinner. This was her. My mother had found me after all these years. Through welling tears, I replied, I don't know how you found me, and I don't care. This is my family, not yours. If you come anywhere near my daughter again, I swear to God, I will kill you. The next text came in only moments later. You can try. I will see you this evening for dinner. XOXO. Mimi. I spent the rest of the day in a panic. I barricaded every door and window into my house. I was taking absolutely no chances. What the hell was I so scared of? At this point, she must have been 45. Surely I would be able to overpower her if it came to that, right? I put my daughter down to bed at 7:30. After triple checking that there was no way in or out of this house, I sat in my kitchen, a knife clutched in my hand, watching the front lawn. As expected, another text came in. This text was a single image, an image of my home. An image of me in the window, eyes filled with fear. Another message came in that simply read, I'm here. My animal instincts kicked in. If she was here, I was going to face her. By God, I was absolutely not going to be afraid of this woman. I would not allow her any more control over my life. I was going to end this. I pulled the armchair out from in front of the door, tearing apart my barricade I had been so worried about before, and stormed into my front lawn, knife still in hand. That's when I saw her. She was standing unmoving, unblinking in my neighbor's front lawn, directly across the street, wearing my pink frilly dress and an impossibly tall silver crown. As I walked closer, I began to realize something was horribly wrong with her. The dress she was wearing looked torn to shreds. It was covered in deep brown stains, and I swear I could smell it from where I stood. Not only that, but she was completely deformed. Her once long blonde curly hair was now matted and gray. It looked as though it had begun falling out of her head in clumps, leaving large bald patches. She was impossibly thin, her now pale yellow-tinged skin stretched paper thin over sharp bone. There were green, pus-filled pockets along her arms and legs that looked almost like mold. Then her face, oh dear God, her face! It was like something from a horror movie. Her lips seemed to have receded, showing thick black gums and yellow cracked teeth. The lack of lip did not stop her from painting a cherry red ring around her perpetual smile. Her eyes seemed to have shrunk back into their sockets. Smoky eye makeup made them look like deeply bruised pits. She raised a single rotting hand and gave me a beauty queen wave, turning her wrist back and forth. I let out a blood-curdling scream before quickly turning around and bolting back inside. I slammed the door behind me, returned the armchair into its defensive position, and ran to my kitchen window, but she was gone. I thought of calling the police, but they had been useless already. No, this was my fight, and something inside of me knew it. But oh God, what was wrong with her? For the first time in my life, I decided to look my mother up on the internet. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I had to know what was happening. I couldn't just wait here like a sitting duck for that monster to come back. I typed her name into the search bar. The first few articles were all old, simple retellings of her pageant winnings and interviews from 10 years ago. Then I saw an article from this year, 2 months ago to be exact. It was a scanned image of a newspaper article, far smaller and less extravagant than the others, from her youth, crammed into the bottom of the page. The article detailed a couple who was taking a morning walk when they stumbled upon an unmoving body. I'll give you 2 guesses as to who it was, but I'll bet you only need one. She had overdosed. She was a crackhead. My mother. My perfect, ever-bragging mother. A crackhead. More importantly than that, she was dead. Only she wasn't dead. She was outside. I just saw her living and breathing. I tried to rationalize, only to realize that that thing I saw outside could not have been living and breathing. My breath shortened. My stomach emptied onto the kitchen floor once again. My heart began to beat out of its chest when the last message came in. I'm coming in now. I am going to see my grandbaby. XOXO. Mimi. I'm sitting here now in my daughter's room trying not to wake her. I can feel the tears streaking down my face. This last message came in 5 minutes ago and the knocking started 2 minutes ago. I can't move. I'm frozen with fear. My poor baby is sleeping soundly behind me with no clue as to what horrors are happening around her. I don't know what to do. My mother's knocks have finally ceased. I can hear her punching the keypad. It's too late. That thing is here. She found me. I still have my knife. I hope to God that I have the strength to use it. Lydia, if by some miracle you find this someday, please know that I love you and that I plan to go out fighting to protect you. I am so sorry.
I'm 24 years old, female, and I live in Michigan. This happened in 2014 when I just turned 19 years old. I got convinced by one of my friends to try out Tinder, a dating app where you can meet people. As it's notorious for one-time flings, I wasn't really feeling comfortable in trying it as I wanted something a little more serious. However, after hearing the success story of my friend on how she met her boyfriend, I caved in, choosing to take my chances. I guess I should mention I never had a boyfriend up to this point, as I had always been a little more on the shy side. At any rate, I quickly made a profile, and after a couple of days, I started talking to this one guy, who we're going to call Johnny. Johnny was a couple of years older than me, and lived within a 30-mile radius. On his profile, I saw a bunch of selfies and pictures of him in lab coats and playing with animals. He was pretty good looking with his short brown hair neatly combed, with blue eyes and his short stubble. Apparently he was looking to study to be a veterinarian, which went well with my goal of becoming a nurse. I wasn't trying to think too ahead, but it was just a thought I had just in case. This Johnny guy ended up messaging me the same night we got matched, and he introduced himself before asking me if he wanted to be friends. I thought, why not? And we started to text each other every single day. And that's how it began. Every morning I would awake to a message wishing me a great day and telling me how beautiful I was. That really gave me the confidence boost I've been long seeking for years. A month comes and goes, and we're starting to become a lot more comfortable speaking to one another. We had now moved from talking on Tinder to Instagram, where he had the same photos. I did find his follower count a bit questionable, as I was the only one following him. Also, all the photos he had on Tinder were literally posted within 24 hours to his Instagram. I asked him what the deal was, but he told me he had just made an Instagram account for the first time. Whatever, I thought. One day I came up with the idea of doing a phone call, but he was always making up excuses of being busy with studying or attending classes. I understood where he was coming from since I was busy with 5 classes myself, and I barely had time to even sit down to watch the TV. But the thing is, it got to be a little too much. Summer vacation had arrived, and he was still making up excuses. This was a warning sign to me, as I love the show Catfish, and I already know the signs of a possible imposter, just from watching the series. Even so, I guess I was so love-struck by his looks and his messages, I really wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Finally, however, we decided on a day and time to do a phone call, and that day arrives, with me eagerly awaiting my cell phone to ring. At a little past 9:30 p.m., I get a call from an area code matching Johnny's. I answer with my heart beating at 1,000,000 miles an hour, my palms sweating and shaking, as I stumble over my words, giving a friendly greeting.
Hello? Is this Johnny? Hello there, Ashley.
Yes, this is him. How are you? Here's something I need to describe because obviously, just by typing it out, he would never know. His voice sounded very deep and old, if that makes any sense. It's like I was speaking to a 50-year-old. He claimed he had been in an accident when he was younger, which caused damage to his vocal cords, which explained why he was so hesitant to speak to me over the phone. But this is where I caught him on a possible lie. On one of his Instagram posts, he had a short 15-second clip of him covering a song from Imagine Dragons, and from what I heard, it sounded incredible. No signs of possible voice issues. I asked him about the video, but he says he had recorded it a long time ago and had a friend help him fix the voice in an editing software program. Don't forget that clip, by the way. He soon changed the subject as he started to tell me how deeply and madly in love he was with me, before dropping the question of wanting me to be his girlfriend. I was actually so taken aback that I actually said yes in shock. Big mistake looking back. And I started to shed tears thinking things were finally going my way. From that point on, Johnny started to get a lot more manipulative. What I mean is he would ask me what I was doing and where I would be at any given time. If for whatever reason I didn't respond within a certain time frame, he would message me saying I didn't love him and how I was breaking his heart. It's up to this point I was being very patient with him, but I finally made a huge discovery. My friend, the one who introduced me to Tinder, and myself had been randomly looking at some Instagram posts, the ones you see when looking at related hashtags and whatnot, and we noticed something that gave us the chills. There was a picture of Johnny, except unlike his post that had 2 likes, this one had about 200. As for the username, completely different. We clicked on the profile and saw this guy's name was Thomas and he had over 1,000 followers. We scrolled through the posts and we found every single picture Johnny had posted. Even the video where he's singing the Imagine Dragons song was posted. What really broke my heart, however, was seeing this guy was already engaged and Johnny had purposely avoided using any of those photos. I started to cry as my friend held me in her arms, and she called Johnny for me. To our surprise, he answered almost immediately, with a very enthusiastic tone. Hey there, my beautiful joy of sunshine. How are you? My friend cuts to the chase, telling him we had found out his secret, and that he was to explain himself immediately. To no one's surprise, he hung up the phone, and he proceeded not to answer with follow-up calls. Later that night, he sent me various text messages explaining he was sorry and that he was only trying to make a friend because he was lonely. I felt really bad for him, but I told him this charade needed to end. He asks me if we could still be friends, and I make the mistake of saying yes. So right now, you're most likely asking yourself, that had to have been it for Johnny, right? Unfortunately, I didn't title my story Catfish Breaks Into My Home for nothing. Because this gets worse. It had been about 6 months since the last time I'd spoken to Johnny, and I now had my first official boyfriend. One day, we had returned from a double date with the same friend I've been speaking of, and my boyfriend, who we will call Cameron, was dropping me off at my house. By the way, my parents were away for the weekend. Once we pulled up into my driveway, I told Cameron my parents had left him some avocados from our tree in the backyard that they wanted him and his family to have. So Cameron follows me inside as he waits for me in the kitchen since I wanted to go grab something from my room. This is when things go from fun and exciting to an absolute nightmare. Once I open my bedroom door, I see a couple of things. 1, my bedroom window was open, and 2, I saw movement underneath my bed. I then let out a scream when all of a sudden a man crawls out, almost as if I was in some sort of cheap, scary movie. This is a man in his late 40s. He was short, a bit overweight, with gray hair and glasses. The man tells me to relax before saying he was Johnny and just wanted to meet me in person, but I'm already running to Cameron, who meets me halfway down the hallway. All I'm able to manage to get out was man in my room. My boyfriend, who concealed carries by the way, immediately runs into my room and finds the man trying to escape through the window. My boyfriend asks him who he was and what he was doing in the house, but all he says was he was sorry and that he was leaving. Well, he does just that by crawling out through the window and then running across the street to an SUV. that I hadn't realized was parked there. I took a couple of quick photos of his getaway vehicle, along with the license plate, for evidence. Cameron then calls my attention over to the bed. Chills run down my spine as my boyfriend pulls out a small pocket knife from under the bed that had been left by this stranger. Or I guess I should say, Johnny. In any case, we called the authorities, and an investigation was launched almost immediately. Together with physical evidence and the text conversations I provided, I was able to get a restraining order, and he was never to contact me again. As for jail time, he did get it, but I didn't pay attention to any of the details, since I just wanted to move on with my life. It's been well over 5 years, and Cameron and I are now engaged, and we live across the country. We don't post on social media anymore, and if for the rare times we do, we never reveal locations or even plans. I have even legally changed my name to avoid them altogether. In case anyone is wondering, I believe this Johnny character found out where I lived because of some of my posts that I had public. Also, I contacted the original Instagram account of who Johnny took the photos from, and he was just as equally freaked out as me. Last I checked, I wasn't able to find him anymore, since I'm pretty sure he either changed his username altogether, or he got rid of his account.
When I was 18, I worked at my college's residence building at the front desk, and I think I almost got assaulted, or murdered. You be the judge. During the summer, the building operated as a hotel, so 2.5 floors were hotel rooms, and half of the 3rd floor were student rooms. The whole building operated with a hotel swipe key system that was pretty outdated, and all the doors were powered by 4 AA batteries. If the batteries died, there was a decently lengthy process to replace them and reprogram the door. A dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building while I was working an overnight shift at around 1 or 2 a.m. and said he left his key card in his room. I made him a new one and made my first error of the night. Hotel guests could have as many room keys remade as they wanted, hypothetically. Students, however, were supposed to be given a temporary key card and charged $2 to be returned when theirs is located. I gave him a new key for his room and asked if he was a student or a hotel guest, and he replied, student. At this point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was caught up doing administrative duties and forgot. I used to trust people way too easily at this job, but quickly learned not. Later on in the night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m., he came to the desk again and said he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he just forgot his key again, and he said no, the door wasn't working. I asked if the light was coming on when he swiped his card, and he said no, so I figured the batteries were dead. I told him I'd have to change the batteries, and I went up to his room with him. He asked me for my name, and I told him. He didn't tell me his. I opened the room door manually with a master key and told him I'd have to prop it open while I worked on the back panel to replace the batteries. He said, no, it's okay. I'll close it. And closed and deadbolted the door locked. Really fucking weird. But I tried not to think about it. I had changed the batteries on plenty of other doors by this point, and some students were iffy about having their doors propped open for their room to be on display for anyone walking by. He also had a really thick accent, and I thought he might be an international student, since we had a lot of students from other countries where English was not their first language. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought maybe it was also just a language barrier issue. At this point, though, I really felt like something was wrong, but I tried to ignore it so I didn't freak him out. While I was trying to focus on fixing the door as quickly as possible, he kept trying to entice me to go further into the room, saying his bed was broken and he needed me to take a look at it. There was something underneath that needed to be fixed, etc. He held out a little gold house key and said, I have a key. Go get it, and threw it under the bed. He said there was a leak under the fridge. He just kept trying to get me down on the ground, throwing random problems at me. Obviously, I told him no. I'd send maintenance up in the morning to take a look at it if anything was broken. I had my back to him, and he asked me if I would take off my glasses. I said, no, I need them to see. His tone of voice changed, and in the most steady, chilling manner, he said, Ella, "It's okay. You can take them off." And from behind me, he reached around and tried to take off my glasses. I swatted his hand away and, trying to remain composure, said, "No thanks. I need to keep them on." Even though he was creeping me the fuck out, I didn't want to be rude to him. I didn't want to get in trouble if he complained about me, or risk upsetting him and having him yell at me. I got up to grab something from the door repair kit and undid the door deadbolt and opened it up in the process. He jumped towards the door to close it again and told me to keep it closed. I told him no. I had to open it to start reprogramming it from the front. While I held the door open with my foot and grabbed something from the door repair kit, he started playing with the little wispy hairs at the top of my forehead and trying to touch my shoulder. I swatted him away again and asked him not to touch me and focused on getting the fuck out of there. He once again tried getting me to follow him into the bedroom, saying the bed was broken, and I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot any actual problem with his bed. This is when I realized he had nothing in his room. No dishes in the kitchen, no shower curtain in the bathroom, no sheets on the bed. Nothing. This wasn't his room. My brain once again went back to the international student theory, thinking he had just arrived today and hadn't gotten a chance to buy anything yet, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. I fiddled around with the door for a few more seconds before announcing that it was fixed, and quickly gathered the door kit and left. Before I had reached the elevator, he came back out without his shoes on to follow me. He tried to get back in to get his shoes and called out, "Ella, the door isn't fixed. You need to come back." I went back and opened the door manually and told him if the door was broken, I'd have to send up maintenance to fix it in the morning. I knew he was going to follow me to the elevator again, so I closed the door behind me once he went inside and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and saw that the room he was in was supposed to be empty. It wasn't a student room or a hotel room. I locked myself in our back office and called campus security. He came down a few minutes later and went behind the desk. I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait, now that I knew he wasn't a resident. He tore the corner off a slip of paper I had sitting on the desk and drew a flower on it, then put it back on top of my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room and tried convincing them he lived there so he wouldn't have to leave. He kept showing them his key, which had decided to work on the door again somehow. They escorted him back downstairs and came to ask me if he really did live there. Obviously he fucking didn't. That's why I called you guys crying and terrified. He kept interjecting to argue that he did live there, but couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security asked him for his student card, and he couldn't produce it, so they told him he would have to leave if he couldn't prove he lived there. While they were grabbing his information, I listened from the office and could immediately tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just a bunch of random numbers. The name he gave was prefixed by, as if he was trying to think of a name. When they asked him for his address, he just said, "Across the street." One security guard asked if he lived in the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but couldn't tell them what the building number was. He said his apartment number was 1200, but I moved into that building a few months later, and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked what his purpose was to be sneaking into a room, he just kept up the ums and ahs and saying he didn't know. They'd ask, "Were you trying to see a friend? Do you know anybody who lives here? Were you here to hurt somebody?" And he kept fidgeting and saying, "I don't know. No reason. I was just here." At one point, he tried to tell him he was my friend, at which point I poked my head out of the office to say that I literally had never seen him before that night. He left. We didn't call the police because he didn't actually do anything, but it was still fucking unsettling. Later on, it dawned on me how he figured out that the room was vacant. One of the housekeepers had been using it as her personal break room. A few days later, a housekeeper came to the desk and told me they found the door deadbolted open, the TV on, and a housekeeper inside watching TV. She must have forgotten to close the door when she left for the night, and when the creep let himself into the building, he found it. I never saw him again, and to this day, I have no clue what he was doing there. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still have me the heebie-jeebies.
I was working at the police station when I checked the local newspaper. The headline immediately caught my attention. Patients went missing from the hospital. The article mentioned that a few patients who were close to dying went missing and nobody knows what happened to them. The first case was recorded 2 months ago and the most recent one happened yesterday. The nurses can't find them. All of them were dying so they couldn't escape the hospital. My wife also worked there, so I called her. "Yeah, we have no idea what happened to them," she said. "We've checked every corner of the buildings." I got home around 7 p.m. My wife was already home. She usually got home a few hours before me. As I was looking for lunch, she came upstairs from the basement. "What were you doing down there?" I asked. "I put some old broken chairs there," she responded. "I'll probably renovate the whole basement soon." "Why?" I raised my eyebrows. Since we moved there, we hadn't used the basement. It was strange. There was nothing interesting down there, just a few spiders. Why not? I had no better thing to do. I finally agreed. The following day I went to work again. We've got a call from the hospital to go there and investigate the missing persons because their families want answers to what happened to them. I drove there with Mark, another police officer. Dr. Martin, one of the doctors, told us every information about the missing patients. He even showed us where we could find their beds. It was in the same room my wife worked in. She was home at the time. She didn't work on Fridays. "It seems like all the patients were really close to the hospital's back door," Mark said to Dr. Martin and me. "What if they escaped there?" "Impossible." Dr. Martin shook his head. "All of them were on their final days. They couldn't walk, and we hadn't found any strange footprints leading out the back door. There's also the whole parking lot. Somebody would have seen it if they escaped there. What if someone smuggled them out?" I theorized. "It seems like all the missing patients were close to the back door. Someone could drag them to the parking lot and drop them in the car." "But who?" Dr. Martin asked. It was a fair question. Who could have done that, and why? "I have no idea," I responded. My wife also works here and hadn't noticed anything strange. "We will speak to the staff here next week," Mark said. "Make sure that everyone will be here." After that, we went back to the police station to write some reports, then spoke about it to our boss. I arrived home at the usual time, but didn't find my wife. I heard strange noises from the basement and wanted to go down there. But then she came upstairs. "Hi," she greeted me. "So, are you working on that basement?" I asked. She looked strange. I thought I saw a small amount of blood on her face. "Do you need any help?" "No, I can do it alone." "Are you sure? I can help. I'll be home the whole weekend anyway." "Thanks, but I'll handle it." "What are you doing anyway there?" "We don't need that basement that much." "Stop asking me so many questions," she shouted at me, frustrated. I was surprised. "Sorry, I'm tired. Look, just don't go down there, please," she said in a calmer tone, then went to sleep. The following day quickly went by. She was in the basement almost all the time, and I was reading some books. She then told me she was going to the market to buy some food. After she left the house, I came out of my room and went to the basement door. It was strange, as I still heard some noises coming from below. I was curious. I opened the door and looked down the stairs. I only saw darkness, so I used my phone to illuminate the narrow walls. I slowly walked down the stairs. The noises were getting louder. After about 20 steps, I arrived there. I immediately regretted it. There were some steel cages inside, and in every cage there was something. Something I can't even name. Old, rotten bodies. Some of them looked like the missing persons from the hospital. I froze, as I couldn't know what to do. And the worst wasn't the fact that the bodies were there. They were moving. Their eyes were white. One of them grabbed the cell's door with his rotten hand. I finally ran back to the stairs, trying to get out of there as soon as possible. At the top of the stairs, there was my wife standing with angry eyes. "I told you not to go there," she said slowly. "What the hell are you doing down there?" I shouted at her. "What are those things? These are the patients that went missing." "I'm going to be the greatest scientist ever known," she responded. Her voice was confident. I felt like I didn't know her. "I stopped death itself. I saved those patients from death." I had no idea what to do, so I just tried to run out of there, pushing her aside, but as I was trying to push her away, she bit my finger. I screamed because of the pain, but tried to run out anyway. I looked down at my hand and one of my fingers was missing. I ran up to the bathroom, then locked the door behind me. "Don't hide from me!" she shouted from outside. "You should be proud of me. I'll save humanity! As she was shouting, I found some bandages to stop the bleeding from my finger. She kicked the door multiple times, then stabbed it with a kitchen knife. My only chance was to escape out the window. I opened it, then crawled outside. The only problem was that the bathroom was on the floor. I had to jump. The pain in my legs was horrible as I fell to the ground. I immediately called Mark to get to my house in his car. He then took me to the hospital to patch me up. The following day, I told them and the police what happened. Yeah, we figured there was something wrong, Mark said. Your house burned down last night just after I brought you to the hospital. The firefighters found the bodies you were talking about, but your wife is missing. We have no idea where she is.